Well, we finally got our promised message of hope. What resonates with you from watching this film with your own actions in your life? The changes you've made or the habits you've started to make amends. I don't think there is anyone present on this discussion who has not come to the realization that that's the work we have to do in the remainder of our lifetimes.
I'd just like to say, this was really good. But to answer your question, one thing that's bothering me is all the people that haven't come to this realization, that don't believe it, the people that see a movie and say, well, I'm really sorry for those poor people across the world who have to relocate because their home is not sustainable anymore. But I'm not going to change my lifestyle. And what do you say?
They need to be forced.
Well, they, if there's enough of them, that's my worry. There's not enough of us, and there's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
We could all be forced into extinction.
Fran, I agree with you that it looks like it will be an impossible test because there are more people who don't hear the message and don't believe the message and won't do anything about it. And the first thing I think is that we need Sheri's statement that probably those of us who are here are already amongst those who had know enough to believe this. I think, Fran, that we need to support each other first.
Yeah, okay.
That we are probably a very small group, and that we can grow despondent over this. And I think not only do we need to nurture the world, but we need to nurture ourselves so that we will not give up. We will not stop telling our own children, our own friends, our own church groups. I think we are just as vulnerable as the rainforest. And that groups like this are a way to nurture this, that we believe that is actually, this is what God wishes. And we need to take care of ourselves along with the world.
Thank you, Pat.
Very good.
A wonderful Franciscan by the name of Richard Rohr, perhaps you're familiar with his work, often says, we don't change people by telling them what's wrong. We change people and systems by demonstrating through our own life and actions something better. I think I'm paraphrasing. He says it much better. He's so good at saying things well. But I've longed that way of thinking is really important to those of us who've spent a life engaged in making better, right? And against the people who are resistant to that. And it can be very despairing, but I don't think there's anything to be gained by us and them. We're all in the same boat. I think for me, the only way is to say, I choose to do better. I choose to love the world better. I choose to make changes in my own habits and lifestyles. And in doing so, regardless of what I say, my actions have influence on people in my little world. If that makes any sense.
Yes.
So that's why we have solar panels, even though it was a stupid financial decision. And my parents said they would never do it because they wouldn't get the cost payoff in the remainder of their lifetime, and neither will we, and I don't care. Because cost payoff, or whatever you call that term, Gary, where you get back what you put in, isn't my measurement for success. What's my measurement for success? Doing something now to do better. That happened to be an expensive one. I'll tell you, food waste composting is a lot more financially manageable than solar panels, and probably nearly as effective, if not more. So there are things all of us can and are doing. I'm really curious to hear about that. And what I want to talk about next week is, where are you connected? Because I think there are lifelines out there, not necessarily your church, but perhaps in organizations that are faith-based, related, many churches belong to, and so on and so forth. And I want to hear where you've chosen to get connected for support, encouragement, ideas, and just somebody that says, we're on the same page with you. We're in this fight with you. So that's next week's question. But today's question is, what are you doing to do better? And is it something you just started recently, or is it something that's so embedded in your life that you have a hard time even thinking of it? Because it's just it's become a part of who you are.
I think for me, it's become part of who I am. I just realized when I was giving somebody my very old AOL email address the other day, which people kind of giggle at when I say AOL.com, but it's Earth Oasis. And that was actually, my kids are now almost 35 and 38. And it's when I was homeschooling them in their primary years, and the name of our school was the Earth Oasis. And we came up with that name because that's what we were studying a lot, and they were sharing it with their friends, after school would let out, and they'd play with their neighbors and friends. And they had their own little clubs, teaching about endangered species and all this, and so that's always been part of our lives together with my kids. And I think those of us who have kids, that's, a tremendous way to spread our network is through theirs, because they have they're so wise about it, really. I learned from them now.
Right.
I was going to say that here in California, we had such a water shortage last year. So that we were limited to even just have our lawns or our garden areas or whatever. We only could water once a week. And so I became very conscious of water usage. And I had pails that I was putting in my shower as I would turn on the shower and wait for the hot water. And after I had done that for about 6 months, I thought that's kind of a pain.
It is.
So we got the water circulator or whatever we put in our bedroom so that we get the hot water almost instantly. And so there's less usage of water there. And and this was because my husband had nagged me to do this when I brush my teeth, not to leave the water running. You turn it off, brush the teeth. And simple things, but it was a start anyway, for being more conscious of water usage. Yeah.
And Mary, that's so true, because once you start to pay attention, you begin to notice things in a lot of other areas as well.
Mhm.
That seems to be kind of the way it goes. What you pay attention to shows up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Gary or Mary Pat, either one of you, go ahead.
Oh. Mary Pat.
Go ahead, Gary.
I just want to say that right now I'm looking into solar. And it will be not a very good financial decision. And I'm so used to making financial decisions based on payback and return on investment.
Yep.
That's hard for me to break from a time where I look at, I've got to have some benefit out of this. But I look at it now, and you helped me, Sheri, by what you just said, as a benefit to the world. Not only to me personally, but there is a benefit that I'm giving to the next homeowner, hopefully, whoever it happens to be. So right now it's it's a tough decision, but I think I'm leaning towards doing that in the next few months.
I think it's about introducing ourselves and others to the fact that there is another metric for measurement besides cost benefit ratios, right? Financial cost. There's a cost to the world. We can still talk cost benefit. We just need to shift it from being about capital to being about earth. So Mary Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing that came to me most is how do we make it easy for the others to join the team or tribe that we think we are now a part of? And I definitely think that there are grassroots organizing ways to do that. And they can be super simple things where, someone comes up with something that we share on social media or whatever that says on Monday we do this, on Tuesday we do this. And it becomes kind of a mantra, but also becomes something that just builds awareness with people. And we all have our own networks, so we share that. Did you know that on Monday I always do X, which is I'm really conscientious about the compost that I'm using, and on Tuesday I and on Wednesday I share it with 3 people. I share what I'm doing with 3 people. I mean, I just think that we have to take this from a level of, okay, we have found something. How do we share that find? And how do we do it in a way that amplifies the message swiftly?
I was so pleased to hear him mention about the banks and retirement pension funds.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I want to do is order t-shirts that say, ask me about your money.
Okay.
I want to get them for all of our Move the Money group, Gary, so that we can wear our ask me about your money out and have people say, what do you know about my money? Right? What do we know about their money? We know it's dirty if they're in one of 4 big banks or have a credit card with certain companies, and we can tell them that. And then we can say, and we can help you make a different choice. So that's one of my dreams.
Gotta get the conversation going.
One thing we've noticed that a lot of these international conferences they have on climate change, there are a lot of young people who come to those, but most of them come from nations who have been affected by climate change.
Yeah.
I'd say basically the people in our country are not affected. It's getting worse and worse. And it was really great for me to hear. I can't remember where the young people were, in some state in the Midwest, not Midwest, was it?
Montana,
who are suing their state for not, making their state a better place to live.
Yep, they're suing Montana for robbing them of their right to a future.
Yes.
Okay, wow.
That's the premise of the lawsuit.
Nice.
Yeah. And there's a lawyer in the Biden administration who had a lot to say about the Inflation Reduction Act, whose working premise is we don't make decisions on today's population. We make decisions for
Wow.
the generations going forward. And that's an old Native American Deborah, you might have to help me out here because you probably know more than I do. But it is the mindset that what you do today is for 7 generations forward.
That's correct.
Is that right? Can you say more about that?
And that's been around for a very long time. And I don't even think it's just Native American. I think most indigenous cultures also have that in their mindset. And it comes back to that idea of sustainability. I found it very interesting in this documentary where he really does talk about population. Because I think it was last week I mentioned about that one documentary. Yeah, the documentary I watched on God TV, the preacher and the environment. Now his thing, because he talked about the book, The Population Bomb back in the 70s. And I remember reading that for my science class. And I think it kind of directed me why I didn't have children. And, but he just found that awful. So it's really interesting, just, what people, the decisions we make. That and I was a chicken to be a parent.
That's okay. Someday you will feel comfortable enough to be visual. It was interesting to me that the population was what he started with, because in a lot of climate talk, it's sort of the elephant in the room. We talk a lot about emissions reduction. We don't talk about the numbers of people who are creating those emissions and their needs, food, energy needs that drive those emissions. So it's interesting to me that Project Drawdown, when we had our class, at that particular time, because their priorities are always shifting with the times. It's a rapidly moving field, as you all know. But their number one, their number one solution was population reduction, population control, and number 2 was the education of girls. Just like Attenborough said. If we can keep girls in school longer, we provide them with more opportunities than traditional motherhood roles and so on. So I thought that was an interesting parallel, that I heard him say a lot of things that I find in different specialty corners of the problem.
Well, and I think you can have a higher population level if you choose to live more simply. And back in I think it was the late 80s, 90s, a book was out on, it was on bioregionalism by Bill Duvall and George Sessions, I believe. And they talked about the GDP and everything. It's just how we consider progress.
Right.
About changing that, what progress really is.
Suzanne, you were going to say.
Yes, I think it was Gary's point about people being displaced by climate being around the world and not necessarily in the United States. I just did a study for a resolution at our Senate here in the Rocky Mountain area, and found that there are 20 million Americans on the move because of climate. One kind or another, whether it was hurricanes or wildfires, unable to farm land economically anymore. This is in Iowa. And I remember that because I used to live there. So I think it's time for us to understand that it's actually here too. And we just are going to be affected more and more with time until we take some of these measures that Attenborough has suggested. That's my point. Yeah.
Well, I think we've had some really poignant things happen in just the last week in our country, where New York was so plugged up with air pollution that from the fires burning in Canada. Well, we've had the fires burning in California also, and it is something that we have to come to grips with. But here you've got millions of people now that are affected by air quality, and that air quality just moved, and I can't remember where I read it just recently, to another state. Well, Minnesota got it too, with the winds shifting, and so we've been affected by Canadian wildfires. So we've got to do this on a global basis somehow.
Right. And we put a lot of attention and a lot of money and a lot of disaster relief on the catastrophic events.
Oh, right.
But the predictions are for Phoenix, Miami, Atlanta, Houston. In not too many years, it becomes impossible to air condition the property in those cities with the temperatures, daily temperatures in the summers reaching what they will be reaching if the warming rate continues. So we have, and then as Suzanne said, we have this, the cropland issue, and the growing season is actually moving out of the United States, the growing zone, into Canada. So Canada's going to have great farming for a while, but the whole grain belt of the upper Midwest is not going to be able to grow as it currently grows. Now, I happen to believe we're pretty innovative people, and there will be solutions, because who can move 7 million people out of a city, right? When it gets too hot. There have to be solutions. I have to believe that we are a resilient enough species to come up with a few. Gail.
Something that you just said, Sheri, struck with me, and that is about how we keep throwing money at, when there's a disaster. And what we're doing is putting Band-Aids on. We're fixing what got damaged or destroyed or whatever. It makes my mind kind of do a little flip. And I think the companies, is it State Farm and somebody else, who are beginning to say,
Allstate.
no, we're not going to insure those. Allstate. We're not going to insure those. I think that might be the beginning of a movement that's going to shift people's attention and their thinking, so that we're not doing the Band-Aid, we're doing the prevention. To put the attention and the money talks. We know that.
And I would say, wow, Allstate and State Farm are really ringing the bell on this really important issue, if they weren't so
Right.
dirty.
Right. Well,
If they weren't investing so much in the fossil fuel. They are funding the very industry that they now refuse to insure the consequences of.
Well,
Something's wrong with this picture.
making changes, I really believe this, and I think we do a fairly good job of practicing. And that is, you have to act locally and think globally. So they're tiny little bites, but we can think about what to do in my own home, or what to promote or stimulate in my congregation or in my neighborhood, or whatever, and then do the advocacy thing.
The advocacy thing.
That's what it's there for.
Right.
And the other thing is that everybody on this call has color of hair just about like mine. And it's the grandchildren and the great grandchildren that we need to have involved and invested in this. You remember a couple of generations ago when the smoking thing
Right.
in the United States did this, because of the education in the elementary schools about how horrible smoking was for the individual. And the kids came home and shamed their parents into quitting. And so we enjoyed a generation and a half of kids that really were not smoking, and people who quit. Well, if we can just, kind of do that kind of education again, and that kind of a push, and let people see what the ultimate end results are.
Right.
Not just,
It's a movement, like a
Yeah.
glacier.
Yeah.
Slow and steady as we all are, and some of us will grow old and die
And
before we
I
see the
personally-
results. It's like Martin Luther said, if he knew the world was going to end tomorrow, he'd still plant a tree today.
Right.
That's the spirit most of us seem to have inherited.
And I personally have seen glaciers both in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere in my lifetime of travel that
Right.
have shrunk to, way back.
Well, I'm going to close with a blessing for you from the
Good.
book, The Lives We Actually Have. We did a book study on it earlier today. And this blessing is entitled, For When You're Tired of Broken Systems.
Mhm.
Oh God, I am done with broken systems that break the very people they are meant to serve. Harness this anger, channel it into worthy action, and show me what is mine to fix and what boundaries to patrol, to keep goodness in and evil out. Blessed are we who are appalled that brute ignorance can so easily dominate over decency, honesty, and integrity. Blessed are we who choose not to look away from systems that dehumanize, deceive, defame, and distort. We who recognize that thoughts and prayers are not enough. We who stand with truth over expediency, principle over politics, community over competition.
Mhm.
Oh God, how blessed are we who cry out to you. Empower us to see and name what is broken, what is ours to restore. Guide us to find coherent and beautiful alternatives that foster life, hope, and peace. Help us to use our gifts with one another in unity. Blessed are we who choose to live in anticipation, our eyes scanning the horizon for signs of your kingdom, heaven come down as we wait. And I might add, as we work.